Welcome to BAM It with John Michael and Mari, covering all things business, accounting, management, marketing, and IT, the place where businesses and entrepreneurs find the forest through the trees.
Hey guys, and welcome to BAM It. I am John Michael Cletus, and my trusty sidekick,
Mari Peterson with Marketing Outpost.
I just love to call her my sidekick so she can look at me and slap me.
Actually, so I can sidekick you back.
Correct. I'm too well below the totem pole to be Mari's sidekick these days. Or the other way around, for her to be my sidekick. No, I'm just going to keep talking. Brought to you by Peridot Consulting, Inc. and Marketing Outpost. And today we're going to be doing another Billism episode, and we've got our good friend and mentor, Bill Kelley, here today. And Bill, what is the Billism of the day?
The Billism of the day. A leadership trait is a checkup from the neck up.
Is that a doctor's visit?
No, it's more of a leadership visit with your staff, with your people, with your business. So first things first, let's talk about the first thing. Checkup from the neck up comes with your onboarding. Day one of that employee. We have the orientation process, as you know, which the employee goes through to sign all the paperwork and learns about the organization and the company. The second part is that we need to have the onboarding process where the employee is taken to their work environment, they're introduced to their staff, they're shown the tools that they would be used and the reason why their job exists and the importance of that. Now, the checkup and the neck up takes place thereafter. So many times we just tend to put that employee out there and say, okay, contact me if you need me. But oftentimes, understand this, first things first, the most motivated that employee is day one when they start their job. Through that process, that first 90-day process, each day it could be a demotivator. In other words, they didn't sign on for this. They didn't understand the job task. They didn't understand what their role was. So that's where the checkup and the neck up comes in. I suggest that after 5 days, a week, you do a checkup and the neck up with that employee. Stop. How's it going? And more or less look at the nonverbals as well as the verbals. That employee may look at you and go, well, it's going okay. Now, if somebody said that to me, I'd say, okay, is it all going okay? Or be more specific. Do you have the right tools? Is this what you thought it was going to be? So again, a checkup and the neck up is actually checking in with that employee. And then from that point, you can make a decision how many more times you should check in with that employee based upon the norm, which the norm in your first 90 days should be at least every couple of weeks. Just a walk by, a drive by, whatever you want to call it. Just how's that employee doing? And also check with the other people that work with that employee.
So I'm a very visual person. So when you say check up from the neck up, it just means, checking on what's going on in their mind, what's going on. And from that example, the checkup from the neck up is checking in with the employee or the person that you're working with. It's also something that can be applied if you're a self-employed person. You can do a self checkup for neck up. Is that correct?
Yeah, well said. I mean, so many times, how many times have people said to you, well, are you okay? And then in that reality, you go, you know what? They're asking me because they're seeing something. And so I should maybe ask myself, am I okay? and I would suggest that oftentimes it's like, if you really looked at it, it's like, no, I'm just not feeling myself today. Well, who are you feeling today? And why are you feeling?
Well, and it's also just checking in with your business from the checkup and the neck up, checking in on your business plan, checking in on your goals. And you do a checkup from the neck up from that perspective too, is it?
I would also say that same sort of process should occur with your clients. All of us have clients, and then we finish the project and we move on to something else. But if you regularly check in with them, hey, how are you? How are things going? You'd be surprised how many of them will write you back or call you back and say, I have had something that I want to discuss with you or something that we want to do. They just didn't have the time to make that phone call. It also reminds me of a time back when I was in HR and I had, there were 75 employees at one organization and 50 in another. And what I found is I called it FaceTime, and this is way before there was Facebook. I called it making my FaceTime go around the office. And what I would do is I would just take a stroll around the office, pop my head into offices, say hello, ask how people were. And what I found is that if there were issues, that's when they would come up. People did not necessarily feel comfortable coming to my office and actively complaining or wanting to tell me about something that was a problem. They would instead feel a lot more comfortable if I just happened to be there. And they felt more like, oh, okay, I didn't bring it to you, but since you're here, let me tell you something. So I found that as a better opportunity to actually prevent issues, to also gauge the business environment at that time. Was it a good one? Was it maybe there's some things we need to improve upon? So that's how I look at the FaceTime that you're talking about, and that checkup from the neck up is just sometimes just being there and being available is not just about your office hours.
You guys are spot on. I want to back into this with Mari's comment. I call that an MBO, management being out and about. MBO. Office is not where you need to camp out. You need to be out. You need to feel the organization. You need to feel what's going on. And to your point, is checking in with the staff periodically. How's things going? And it's not necessarily asking that question. It's using all your senses and checking in with the people and at least letting them know that you care. So that's very important. The client base, extremely important. I've often said in my customer service conversation is let's not set our system up to where we're using our customers, our quality insurance program. In other words, we're waiting for that response of how their visit was on social media. And then we respond back. No, we need to be managing by being out and about. So many times I've been hired as a consultant to come in and do a secret shopper, if you will. And the things I see, I say to myself, why can't other people see this? Why can't other leaders see this? So before you go out and hire a secret shopper, maybe spend some time and see what you can do. There's a program out there. It's called Undercover Boss. Undercover Boss goes into the organization and works in the organization and finds these superstars and also finds the opportunities, not problems, but opportunities to set the company up for better success. And at that point, I say to myself, why doesn't the leadership that's on the floor see those opportunities? Why does, if you will, in this case, the boss have to come all the way down and spend time with the operations to see what's going on? Why? Because this is the first time they've been MBOs, managing by being out and about. So again, to Mari's comment, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful comment. If I may, John Michael, you jumped in there, rightly so, and you said, part of the checkup and the neck up is looking at your finances, looking at not only your revenue centers, but your cost centers. Some organizations have just purely revenue centers, but then you've got cost centers, which could be an engineering department, a custodial department, a lawn and maintenance, where they don't bring revenue in. They're there to support the operation. So part of that checkup and the neck up is instead of waiting for your P&L to come out at the end of the month, the end of the year, your P&L coming out at the end of the month, end of the year is telling you where you've been. It doesn't tell you where you're going. So a checkup from a neck up from a leadership standpoint for me is, without being ridiculous, check in daily your numbers. And more importantly, helping your people become business people so they can tell you what the numbers are going to look like. I have been successful with that process in my business walk, and to where I was able to have my leaders, individual departmental leaders, tell me what the P&L was going to look like before it came out.
I think something that you said there, part of what this discussion is about, addresses technology. I believe that we have become a little too dependent on technology, on email and calling, when FaceTime and actually going out there and seeing your employees, seeing your business in operations, and seeing your leadership, that checkup from the neck up is even more important and reveals more than you're ever going to get from an email or even visiting somebody's website. So for example, I toured a print manufacturing location the other day. It's 40,000 square feet. I had no idea it's even in this town. Now, I could have said, I don't need to come over for a tour. They invited me for the tour. And I could have just looked at their website. Oh, okay, I see everything you do. But it was a completely different experience to go over there, meet the people who actually work in production, meet the owner, and actually they provided so much more information to me and details than I would have ever gotten from just looking at their website. So I believe that the checkup from the neck up is partially a saying about being physically there, actually going to people and maybe not relying so much on technology, as well as making sure you're actually taking that pause for a moment and being real and getting to know people.
Wow. Again, you're so spot on. You're so wise in what you just said. And when I hear you speak of that, I think about technology where we tend to use emails. I communicate a rule to not only myself, but those that I've been responsible to. You get an email and then you respond back to it, and then it bounces back to you. And I use my 2 email respond. That is, if I send an email out and then it kicks back and then I send it back and it kicks back, I get up out of my desk and I go look at that person and talk to that person face to face. And I call that picking up the racket. Picking up the racket means they knocked the tennis ball across the court, you knocked it back, they knock it back. If you're going to hit it the third time, drop the racket. Don't get involved in that. Go talk to that person by doing a checkup from the neck up.
Yeah, and I mean, working with staff and employees or partners, that works great. And some of us that have clients, you can even extrapolate that. If you're finding this is going on, sometimes just call the client or ask them to go to lunch. And have that time with them and do that checkup from the neck up. Especially the good clients, you don't want to be complacent on the good clients.
What do you do with a bad client?
I don't have any bad clients. Every single client I've ever had has been the best client I've ever had.
They're opportunities. That's what they are. Well, John Michael, you bring up another great point that comes to mind on the checkup and the neck up. You said call that client, go out to lunch. That is very, very wise to take people out to lunch if you want to have a one-on-one. Because what happens if you meet them in the office, that's their space. If they meet in your office, that's your space. But let's get on a neutral territory. Let's go to lunch, not either one of our spaces. Again, the checkup for the neck up is going to be more meaningful because you're not in your individual space, you're on neutral ground.
Yeah, and I find that we have a good solid 15 minutes of conversation that's to do with work, and the rest is just about how are we doing, and there's no better relationship building there. So we've talked about onboarding with employees. We've talked about, check up from the neck up as far as your revenue and your costs are concerned, check up from the neck up from a customer satisfaction or a client standpoint. What about in innovations? Innovation,
that's your wheelhouse, John Michael, and I'm not surprised that you came up with that, but I enjoy hearing that presentation on innovation. Innovation is and you could speak to it better as well as anybody, but in fact, you know what? I'm going to throw that back at you. Talk about innovation. What is that?
Well, thanks, Bill. I guess I'll try to explain what innovation is. Bill had mentioned the presentation he and I in our roundtable series. We have a whole day dedicated to innovation, but basically innovation is just creating an atmosphere where competition is irrelevant. That's the short definition of it. And, it's the definition of insanity where you're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
What does that have to do with the checkup from the neck up?
Well,
all right. What that has to do with the checkup from the neck up, great question, is oftentimes we get stuck in that if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And in business, we continue to offer our customer base the same thing over and over and over again. Some very successful restaurants understand that after 3 or 4 years, they close the doors and they reinvent themselves. They look at their menu. They look at the things that are what we call love marks for our customers. They don't necessarily change that, but they'll change up the menu. They won't change the chef per se, but they'll change the decor. So again, what they're doing is they're innovating. They're reinventing themselves. Innovative from the checkup and the neck up means with your staff, periodically charge them, encourage them to come up with some innovation ideas on how you can serve your customers differently. Something that the other your competition is not necessarily doing.
I like that. I recently heard from another company, I can't remember their name locally, but they said that they have a monthly sort of roundtable with staff, and it's not an agenda. and it's not any kind of structure where people have to come prepared. But what it is an open time to just come up with ideas. And they all talk about, things that they would like to do, could do, and then some things that maybe they just thought might be a good idea to do things differently. And I like that idea of just saying, here's an open roundtable discussion, pitch in, and maybe they'll come up with some really great ideas that will be implemented.
Yeah, I call that possibility thinking. That is a great example. Also, in your check off on the neck up, invite some of your customers, your clients. Get them involved in this process. Have some munchies and some beverages, and sit around with the staff and say, okay, what are some of the things that you'd like to see our company do that would be innovative? I've worked with a car dealership on that subject. We invited some of the customers that come in, and we talked about when you drop my car off, why don't you bring it back washed? Why don't you bring it back vacuumed out, maybe put some bottled water in it? From that, the staff took that and went one step further, is that when the customer came to pick up their cars that were in for service, they not only did that, but they left chocolate tools in a little gift bag, a little toolbox that they gave back to the customer. Customers love the chocolate tools.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I appreciate you sharing this Billism with us. I know in our roundtable series, I hear it come up all the time. Where Bill's like, well, you just need to do a checkup from the neck up. And that's why we decided to dedicate this episode today on how this concept applies in many venues, from an employee to being self-employed. Bill, you have any parting shots on this before I close this out?
Don't forget to do a checkup from the neck up on self periodically.
That's great. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us today. Please be sure to review this episode. And for more information on who we are or what we do, for this podcast, please visit www.bamit.com. That is BAMM-IT.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice and is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts and guests of this podcast may make terrible attempts at being funny, and this podcast does not defend the merits of this humor, nor does it guarantee that the humor will be successful. It is not guaranteed that you will find this as entertaining as the hosts find themselves.